Today's episode is special. We have a guest on the show. Her name is Chantel. Really cool person I met on my last contract. She's awesome, and she works as a chef. She has some great information to share with you guys. But before I jump into the meat and potatoes of this video, what I do want to say is that if you are a musician and you're looking to work on cruise ships, go ahead and shoot me an email, information right over here, and tell me a little bit about yourself. Chantel, thank you so much for spending some time with me and offering your time for the people back at home. Tell me a little bit about your background as far as working on ships.
So as far as before getting on ships, I worked on land for several years. I've been to 2 culinary colleges, graduated with honors from Humber in Toronto. I apprenticed with McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. And I've worked for almost 20 years in the culinary industry.
Wow.
So it's been a while, yeah. I've owned my own catering business for 12 years prior to joining the ships, and then I decided that I just needed to change. I put my catering company on hold. I still own the rights to the name, but the company is right now silent, and I packed my bags and off I went.
Very cool. Well, so you work in the kitchen and as a chef specifically on ships. So for somebody who is gonna hop into the position, what are some tips you can provide to help them prepare for a position like this as a chef, but also preparing them for working in the kitchen specifically?
Okay. So the first thing you need to know is on ship, the kitchen's called a galley. Number one. So we have a different name for it. So anything off land is the galley. So that's the first thing. A second thing, you're going to have different regulations based on what country you're from as far as the hiring process goes. So for me, I can only really speak to my experiences coming from a North American country working for an American company. So my process of employment is specifically based on my Canadian status applying for an American company. So I can give you those experiences.
Absolutely.
So for me, the one thing that I had to really, really know is that this is definitely a challenge. This is going to be a lot of work. There's no days off. When we say days off, we mean you can have the morning off and you come in at night. That's our day off. It's like a technicality.
Literally the day off.
So it's 7 days a week. It's a 7-day-a-week business. So expect that. Expect that you're not going to punch in your 40 hours, punch out, and have a weekend. It doesn't work that way on ships. And in a culinary world, you have long hours, long days, and anybody who's a chef or a cook already knows that that's a possibility, especially if you own a business. So that's one of the things. The other thing is you need to be aware of is, I don't want to specifically get into salary numbers, but you're not making the same amount as you would on land. And the reason for that is you're not paying rent, you're not paying groceries, you're not paying your electricity bill. They are room and boarding you for all of this. So the benefit is money in your pocket if you don't have those expenses. Some people, especially from other countries, will be supporting your family back home. So you'll get paid in the dollars of the company's nationality. So our ship was American. I got paid in American money. Be prepared for that. You'll get paid in American money. Whatever ship you join, if you join P&O, you're working for a British company. If you're working for a Norwegian-based cruise company, so whatever company you get paid for, you're likely to get paid in the currency that owns the company. That's number one. So whatever you're choosing to work for, make sure you're aware of that.
Now, did that serve to help you? Like, since you got paid in US dollars, and then when you convert it, when you go back home, is it like technically more, or because of the expenses?
Right? Because there's instances where the Canadian dollar is at par, and there's instances when the Canadian dollar is less. So it goes by whatever the bank is. I have an American bank account that I put my money into, so that I can file my taxes appropriately. Gotcha. Because there's different international laws which you'll need to check on, because every country is different how they deal with it, for dealing when you're working in a tourism facility. So I work for an American company. I'm not in my country for almost a year at a time sometimes. I'm making foreign currency. So these are things that prior to getting a job, you may need to want to rectify with your own personal country or nationality that you're dealing with. As how does that transfer? Am I paying taxes only on the interest? Am I paying taxes on the principal? How is that going to work? So before getting the job, I always say research. Ask people personally, their personal experiences, especially I'm from Canada, so I can say how a Canadian viewpoint is. But if you're from the Philippines, you're from India, I can't answer some of those questions because they have very specific guidelines per country on how the application process goes. I applied online. Some people apply in job fairs. Some people have agencies in their representative countries that they can apply for. I went to Royal Caribbean online and applied, and I ended up hiring by their sister company. So the online process is lengthy. It's for me about 6 months from the time that I applied to the time I boarded the ship. Maybe a little bit longer because I applied in January. That's when I put my online application, email sent. I boarded October. So
wow.
That's a long process.
Yeah.
Right? The good thing about that process is they're diligent about who they're hiring. So know your assets. Like if you're a cook, know your assets. Because typically when you apply for a cooking position online, they'll put you in an entry-level position, especially based on your experience. I had the opportunity. I applied as an entry-level position based on my experience, which I just told you, college education, in the business for 20 years, owning my own company. When I actually got the job offer, I was offered a much higher position. So I was able to come in at more the level of where I'm at. A little bit lower, but it worked to my benefit. I didn't want to be a manager managing people I didn't know. So I worked a little under my criteria so that I could grow and learn. And that's one thing you really, especially in the kitchen, don't overshoot. No matter how amazing you are on land, if you've never worked at sea, it's something that you want to understand that this is a new experience for you. You're going to be learning new skills. You're going to be learning a new environment, a new way of doing things. And no matter how much you know, you have to be flexible enough to know that you don't know. So it might be worth your while to apply for a lower position. Remember, you're dealing with salaries that aren't the same as land positions, but the benefits of that are what I said earlier, right? So I personally let go my living expenses. I let go of apartments and a lot of my possessions so that I wouldn't have things I had to pay for back home that would, interrupt into the pocket that I'm trying to make on board.
Absolutely. So when you say don't overshoot, it sounds like what you're saying is don't bite off more than you can chew, yeah? When it comes
exactly.
to, yeah.
What's on board is very different working at sea than at land. Very, very, very different. There's different rules. There's different regulations. There's a different environment. It's very militaristic in the ranking that they do, and then the way they connect business. You have to remember that safety is the number one key on board. If you're on land and an accident happens, in a kitchen, it's very likely that accidents happen, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine all the dangerous things that we do in a kitchen, knives and fire and all these things, right? On board, we don't have the opportunity to just leave and go home if we're sick. You're there. We don't have the opportunity to just drive to a hospital and be taken care of. We're on board. There's medical facilities on board and they're extremely well equipped. However, it's not the same thing as an outside hospital, right? So safety is the number one priority on board, for the plain fact that whether you're crew, whether you're passenger, we have very limited resources to be able to handle some extreme situations. Not that we can't do it, but it's definitely not the same resources as at home, where, as an example, fire is a big thing. We don't have gas burners on board because we don't want anything exploding, no fires, right? Because a fire on board is extremely dangerous. Mm-hmm. So as a chef coming into an environment where you have no gas burners, there are people that have only worked with gas burners because they're the number one way a professional chef works. Not very many chefs work on electric stoves, mm-hmm. right? It's just a small little thing, but it's one of those things where it's a difference due to safety. Mm-hmm. The way we use knives, the way we handle glove use and washing of hands, again, we have a higher standard of health and safety and sanitation than on land for the most part. I'm not saying people on land are clean, but you could probably eat off of our floors. You know, it's one of those things where it's just, the sanitation is extremely high.
Now, because you guys have a higher standard there, does that mean you have to go through more training?
Yes. Everybody who comes on board goes through 2 weeks, sometimes 3, depending on position, of training modules. And those training modules deal with ship life as a whole. Safety, regulations, firefighting, like everything that you would need to know to be safe on board. There's also humanitarian training for dealing with tolerance of other cultures. There can be up to 70 nationalities on board at any given time in the crew. 70! That's a lot of countries. There's a lot of people with different opinions of what is polite, what is rude, what is standard, what is courtesy, what is ethics, what is morality. So knowing those things are brought into our training as well. Then you have your on-the-job training, depending on what position you are. You have to learn to do what you need to do in your specific environment. So the first month on board is extremely chaotic, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's not for everybody, and there's no shame in saying that. I work extremely hard. I have blood, sweat, and tears, literally. And it's an environment where I've never had the most personal growth ever in my entire life of being on board. It's a micro environment, everything happens and it happens big.
Are you interested in learning the 7 alarming things that cruise ship contracts are hiding in the fine print? Go to shiplifetv.com/contract secrets and find out for free. Because one of the biggest problems that I see with new hires is that they don't know what they're signing up for. And they show up on day 1 and they're expected to know everything that's in a 6-page legal contract. So go to shiplifetv.com/contract secrets to watch almost an hour's worth of free content where I break down a 6-page contract and you can learn everything that you need to about vacation, schedule, pay, overtime, benefits, and so much more. That's shiplifetv.com/contract secrets to become a member of the Shiplife TV community and get free access to the crew library. Now back to the video. Since we're on the subject of personal growth and expanding your capacity here, what are some challenges that you've faced specifically with your position that you've learned from that you can share?
Okay. I think communication, because in a kitchen, communication is key. It's a very, very high-paced environment. On the ship, it's no less. It's actually much more high-paced than some of your high-paced restaurants. The guests coming on board have a certain expectation, and then you have to fulfill that expectation, right? And as a chef, you can deal, if you go to a ship and they don't have entertainment, okay. You can go to a ship, maybe they don't have a casino. Okay. You can't go to a ship that doesn't have food.
This is true.
It's impossible. It's the one department you can never live without, no matter how bare bones your cruise line is. You can do without the water slide. You can do without, the 17 jacuzzis, but you can't do without food. It's just impossible. So the expectation for cruises is significantly higher than going to the Mandarin for a buffet Chinese dinner on a Sunday evening. It's like when people come on and they book a cruise, they're paying thousands of dollars. So you have to up your game. So for me coming in, I had to up my game in a managerial role, as a personal role, my techniques, how I cook, everything. And it's fast paced. It's like, okay, learn now. So the trial and error factor of learning on the job training is condensed. You have a very little time. The one thing that surprised me the most, that was the most challenging, is my first time on the ship, I started work right away. There was no okay, you're getting a couple weeks of training, you're going to go here, you're going to go there. You come on board, you get your documents, you get your room, you report for duty. I was like, I report for duty? I don't know what I'm doing. It's my first day on board. Oh my goodness, what am I doing? You report for duty. And then you go and you meet the chef and he tells you where you're working. And you start working, and you're like, okay, and you run with it. That's how it is. So if you're thinking of a job on board, it's go from day 1. You hit the ground running. So make sure you're prepared for that. Make sure you're prepared that you're on. Your game is on. You're on stage immediately.
Right.
That was a huge challenge for me, I think. Just knowing that was something that blew me away a little bit. I thought maybe I had some chance to like settle in, put my bags away. You are not on vacation. This is work.
Yeah, I think that was also something that was very surprising for me as well. Specifically as a musician. Yeah, I came in, signed my paperwork. They said, here's the ship. Boom, 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 boom. Here's your cabin. Set your stuff down. Yeah, now we got PAX drill. And and then you're gonna play 30 minutes after that. Just
exactly, right?
What? Yeah, totally different from land. And nobody told me that. So yeah, I'm glad that you bring that up. That's definitely an interesting challenge that's kind of thrown at you just completely randomly.
And I started in a very unique position because I got hired at a higher level. The expectation on me was much higher because had I started from the bottom, people would have seen me grow and would have helped pick me up. So I came in with my own set of challenges. Being in the cruise industry means that you're working with a lot of different people. I was the only Canadian. I still am the only Canadian as the knowledge that I have right now. I don't think there's another Canadian in the fleet at the moment that works in the galley. That could change. I may be misinformed, but to my knowledge, that's true. Coming in as a female in charge of other people, that's a challenge, especially when you're dealing with a lot of different nationalities and knowing their cultural differences and being able to relate to that. So, and then when I joined what's called dry dock. So dry dock is a specific environment where there's no guests, there's no passengers on board. They take the ship out of the water and they're doing repairs and all that stuff. So for me, people will work their entire ship careers and never having to do dry dock. I did 3 in one contract. So again, another challenge. And the challenge of that is you get extra duties. There's like extra duties that go in charge with the maintenance of the ship and pulling the ship together. And I was building a restaurant and making a brand new restaurant on board and training in that, and then working on another facility when I wasn't doing that to help another department. And so it's a lot more work entailed in certain things like that. But it really helped me because I got a better overview of things and I got trained differently because with no guests being on board, I had a little bit more luxury to learn the environment without the added pressure of impressing a person who's paid, $7,000 for a week-long cruise.
Yeah.
So it was a different environment for me than someone else coming on board, and you're coming into an environment that's already in place. I was coming into an environment that's being built. So I found it easier in that respect because I had an opportunity to be one-on-one trained to open the restaurant and know a new menu, and I didn't have to put my nose in the dirt and just kind of go for it, right? So that did help. That's not always the case though. Usually you come on board and you have no idea where you're going, you don't know where anything is, and say you're going to work there and you're going to do this, and then there's one person that shows you and you got to learn fast. So you can learn fast.
It seems like it's pretty fast paced and there's a lot of pressure there. Do you have any tips on how to deal with that?
Yeah, the first thing to remember is the environment on a ship is pressurized. So basically, if you've ever watched a reality TV program and you look at people and you go, how did they become friends so fast? Or how did they make that thing a big deal? Why was it a big deal? It's because everything inside the ship is pressurized. You live, work, play, party, go outside with all the same people. There's no division between my life, my work life, my social life. Working on land, I leave work at work. I come home, I leave home at home. And the two worlds don't necessarily collide almost ever. Same with my social life. My social life could be different than my family life, which is different than my work life. On board, everything's a gray area. Everything blends in together. So just realize that you can put divisions on things in a healthy way. And once you realize that, you can compartmentalize this pressure belongs in this hour. And once I get back to my cabin, I can be me and I can zen out and I can do these things. So give yourself time to decompress. You're working in an environment that you're always on. When you're not working, whatever you do still affects when you're working. For safety regulations, first of all, because you need to make sure that you're you have the ability to do the job if you're called in at any given time. So if someone's sick, it's not like on land when someone's sick they just call somebody else in. It doesn't work that way. So in order for you to maintain like a good mental break, take the break. Take the break that's offered you. One of the biggest benefits of being on a cruise ship is you're on a cruise ship. Like I said before, I've seen 46 countries since 2015.
Very cool.
I mean, that's a lot. That means I've physically gotten off a ship and seen mountains and rivers and lakes and cultures and things that I never would have seen before. Even if it's only for an hour, I get out there because I know that that's where my spirituality is. I can go out and be one with whatever culture for whatever limited amount of time. That's my break. And it's funny because when you're on land, you get a whole day off to do whatever. I find that being on land, because you have your vacation is several months. It's not like when you're at a job at work, you have like a week long and then you go back to work and then, because we don't have the weekends and stuff off. So when we get vacation, we prize it. Like right now, I'm in the UK. I've been here for 6 weeks. That's my vacation. My vacation is traveling. It's just a funny thing. When you work on a cruise ship, you go home for vacation and you go for vacation to work.
Mm-hmm.
So take the breaks. Take whatever it is that you love to do. Don't forget to do it. If you like to paint. If you like to read. If you need to talk to your family, talk to your family. I mean, in and out on board can be kind of dicey. It is rather expensive just because you're using satellites. I get it. But you have an opportunity to go outside and talk to family, do it. Whatever you need to do, make sure you do it. Don't hold it in, because the pressurized system is one of the things that everything feels bigger than it is. And sometimes that break lets you have a better understanding of how big or how little the situation actually is. So we tend to see minor things as very major in a very big way because of that environment.
Yes. A lot of things are absolutely amplified. In my experience, especially relationships,
Oh, yes.
Yeah, meeting people on the ships, and then all of a sudden you're like friends for life.
It's so true.
Yeah, and then you met them for 2 weeks, and then they have to sign off, but you're just in contact. Like my fiance, I met her on a ship. So I feel that, the pressurized system. Now let's jump into, you had some really good tips on the challenges and some things to consider. Now, what about the people who are interested? So for example, somebody who wants to become, get into being a chef on a ship, whether they have experience or not. How can they start?
So whenever you're considering applying online, make sure you have a really strong resume or CV. So depending on what country you're from, it will be called different things, but the ship uses the term CV. It's basically your life experiences of what makes you perfect for the job. Keys to making a good resume are, don't add everything. Add the most relevant things that are going to give you the keys to success and make them interested. So if you worked for a coffee shop, and then you worked for an auto mechanics, and then you worked for a hotel, right? Unless you can somehow, in a genius way, incorporate the skills from other places to be hospitality related, make sure you have a very strong CV for the position you're applying for. Research the position you're applying for. Ask around. Ask different people, based on your experiences, what you should apply for. Because on board, you'd be surprised at how many different positions there are in the hospitality sector alone. So as far as I'm a chef, maybe a chef isn't the best place for you. Maybe you want to be a baker. Maybe you want to be in pastry. Maybe you want to be a butcher. So even in that environment, there are different opportunities based on your skills, the level of education you have, your experiences, and how you want to grow your career. So you have an opportunity for that. So know what you're applying for and have a really strong character about it. Have to speak English. I know that sounds really silly, right? But you have to be able to communicate in English. They demand it. So if you're where English is not your first language, bone up on it. Start, really, really immersing yourself in it, because that's a number one key for especially American and British companies. And even companies from around the world, they will demand that you have at least some English, conversational English. So a lot of guests that come on board are English. It's a very universal language right now. I know it sounds remedial to say that, but it's very important. The second thing is, know that the process is not immediate. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. When I applied for 6 cruise companies. Only one ever replied to me back, and I ended up hired by them. But don't be afraid to apply to multiple companies and have different sources for what you're going for. You don't have to go big or go home. So know that it's not the all end all of everything. It's a long process. Hang in there. Make sure you get everything. Make sure you ask a lot of questions. They're a very big company. Don't let things fall to the wayside. Don't expect them to do for you. Just make sure you ask all the questions, because the way that the process works is you're going to have several levels to go through. You're going to be Skype interviews. You're going to need to perform background checks. You're going to need to have medicals. There are things that you are immediately going to have to pay for in order for this company to be interested in you. Your police check, number one, you have to pay for it. You don't get reimbursed for that, as far as my experience goes. Your medical, pay for it. Your plane ticket to the first time you go on contract, you're paying for it. So depending on the position on board, some positions will pay for your travel and some positions will not. You need to make sure you understand this process before getting on board. How are they going to pay you? Do they pay with a card, or do you get cash? So asking these questions ahead of time will prepare you for the employment that you're about to have, making sure that you're prepared. Because if you're missing one document, you don't get on board. So make sure you know what the requirements are and you do your due diligence to do them in a timely manner. And remember that this process takes time. So you need to be flexible and understand that don't quit your job as soon as they call you. Let the process go through. Whatever you're working on currently, let the process go through. Don't be dishonest to the employer you have now. I would never do that personally, because that just burns your bridges if something happens on board and then you go home and now you've burned that opportunity. Never burn an opportunity. Be honest with the opportunities you have coming up. So that's another point that I would make is, see, my process took from January to October before I boarded. So can you imagine if I, in January, said, well, I'm applying for this job, I'm just not going to work anymore until October. I'd be in dire straits.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things when applying for the job. Making sure you're articulate, making sure you know your resume, know the basics of your job. They're going to ask you technical questions. They're going to, as a chef, they're going to ask you, what are your 5 mother sauces? What are the temperatures for the danger zone? They're going to ask you technical questions that are basic to any cooking skills. They're going to ask you about different knife skills. They're going to ask you about cuts. And they may or may not. But here's the thing. I know when I got hired, I was asked a lot of technical questions. I was asked a lot of questions about different recipes for very basic, well-known dishes, just because they're universal dishes.
Mm-hmm.
They're French classical dishes that I would have learned in school.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't know those, then me saying on my CV that I went to school and did all this culinary training, and then them asking me a question that related to that training, I would look like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
Never lie. If you don't know, you don't know. Never boast or fake your resume, because they will find out. It's so easy on the ship to be found out that you're not working. Mm-hmm. And you have 90-day probation area where they can send you home for no reason. If you're not working out, off you go. And there's no qualms in saying this is not for me once you get on board. Mm-hmm. There's no shame in it, because it's a hard environment when you're first coming on board for your first time. But you know what? You can do it. I tell everybody that. I've had a lot of people, I can't tell you the times that I would go to work. I would go to work. I would get there. I'd work all day. I would come home. I'd go to my cabin. I would cry, and then I'd stop crying, and it's like, okay, tomorrow's going to be a better day. I would go to work. I probably did that for a couple of weeks. And because I kept telling myself, I can do this, I will get better. 3 years later, I'm still working for the company.
That's awesome. So cool. I'm glad that you jumped into a lot of the specifics there on what to expect, because I feel like a lot of people, they either don't know where to start, or they are don't know where to start as far as being prepared, and so sometimes it's kind of like a mental roadblock where they want to be prepared, but they just don't know what to be prepared for. So I'm really glad that you touched on some of those topics there. A couple other things that I have on my mind here. One specific one from the comment section, we had a guy that was asking about beards, and so essentially grooming policy. Yeah, facial hair and just grooming policy in general. So what's up with that?
Okay, first of all, remember that you're working for a company that is very strict. So if you are used to working on land and being your own person and having your own personality, and you've got a mohawk that's dyed 3 colors, they don't care about your personality. They care about their image of what they're projecting. So if you have an alternative way of being, nothing wrong with that. When you get to the ship, we'll not cut it. Plainly, honestly, just telling you, they have grooming standards that are extremely strict. No matter what your personal views are, you are now hired by the company and a representative of that company. So now you're representing the image that they want to portray, not your personal image of how you see yourself. Very key to know that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they're very forward as far as tolerance goes, as far as you can be whoever you want to be. But when it comes to appearance, you are what they bought.
That makes
sense.
Not
in a bad way, not a demeaning way, but it's you are the image. They bought you for an image.
Right. Absolutely.
They're giving you a paycheck for an image to present yourself as their company standard. Mm-hmm. So each company will probably have different policies in part. But look at an airline. Look at a flight attendant, for instance. Just as an example, when you go on board a plane, you already know how professional a flight attendant looks. When you see a sloppy flight attendant, you automatically go, really? It's just an inbred thing that you do. Mm-hmm. So can you imagine paying thousands of dollars for a cruise and then someone sloppy coming in and serving you a meal or making your bed or doing anything for you? Mm-hmm. Your immediate reaction is you're paying for a service to feel luxurious. The whole point of the cruise is to feel that little bit of luxury. You're going somewhere exotic. You're doing it's an exotic luxury vacation is what a cruise is. Mm-hmm. So you're projecting that image. So remember that when you're being hired. So if you have bright purple polka dot hair,
gotta go.
Need to change that.
Yeah.
If you have each policy will be different. In the galley, okay, so for instance if my cruise line went to Brazil, public health, absolutely no facial hair whatsoever. You have to shave everything, no matter your religion, it doesn't matter. That's the thing. So that's the remember, if you have religious guidelines for certain things, don't work for a cruise company because you're still representing their image. I'm not saying that they're intolerant of religion. That's not what I'm saying. But if you have a religious requirement that goes against their specific grooming or presentation policy, you're better off working somewhere else because you'll still be respected to do their policy. For instance, we work 7 days a week. If you have a holy day, you have to work. Mm-hmm. That's the expectation. Mm-hmm. You work 7 days a week. Mm-hmm. Know that before applying.
Right.
Just as an example.
Right.
So we definitely have on board celebrations for all cultures and religions. That's definitely not a problem. However, if you have belief systems that negate you from working for specific reasons, you're better off on land where you can freely able to accomplish that. On board, you will not be able to accomplish that. In my experience.
Right.
Because we work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I know that's kind of a tricky thing to say, but you have to really remember that being on board is going to play into the hand of the company and not your personal preferences when it comes to what you look like, how often you work, what days are coming up, that type of thing. So really be prepared for that. As far as grooming goes, ask the questions. That's the best thing I can say. So if you're a guy that's got a really big beard and, you've got really long bushy hair, ask the questions. For the most part, the grooming policy is very clean-shaven, very respectable, very classic. I'm going to say classic. That's the best way I can put it. That's my experiences on board is, very classic. But you can understand that as a guest, you have a certain standard that you expect as well, right? Mm-hmm. So just keep that in mind.
Gotcha. Especially for the demographic you're more than likely going to serve as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in the kitchen and you're very well maintained, there are, in my experience, I've seen people with facial hair on board in the kitchen, very well maintained. Certain areas of the world, when we go for certain areas of the world, that changes, and we have to accustom to that change. So you'll have gentlemen that are very, very well maintained, and then they come in completely clean shaven because according to the public health of that area, region of the world that we're going to, that's the requirement. Mm-hmm. So you have to adhere to that requirement.
Absolutely.
Just be flexible to adhere to the requirements. So know what the requirements are, ask the right questions, and be flexible. If you're not flexible, it's not the right job for you.
Gotcha. Now, is there are there any other last tips that may come to mind for anybody specific to working in the galley?
Have fun. Like, the whole point of being a chef is like eat, drink, and be merry. So don't forget that. Being a chef, if you've already been a chef on land or a cook or anywhere in the kitchen, a prep cook, doesn't matter what it is, anytime you've held a knife, you know the rigors of the job. But you know what? Just have a good time. Just remember that what you're there for. So whatever purpose you came on board for, remember that purpose. Don't lose sight of it. Mm-hmm. I came on board to learn. I came on board to be a better chef. I came on board to see the world and experience everything and to learn other cultures and do all those things. And I've never lost sight of that, which makes going into work every day really exciting. You pick up your bootstraps and you put on that scarf, and that's what you do. You're dressed as a role, you play the role, and you can enjoy it a lot better if you consistently remember why you're there. Right.
Perfect. Well, I think you touched on a lot of amazing points, and I think anybody who watches this video interested in working in the galley is going to have more than enough information to get started and enjoy their contract right off the bat. So, Chantel, thank you again for taking the time to provide some information to me and for the people back at home. And I look forward to having you back on the show again to touch on some other topics or anything else that you want to share with with my crew here online. But again, thank you.